Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. With us now in our New York City studio is former New York Governor George Pataki. He led the Empire State for 12 years, from 1995 through 2006. Thanks for being with us.
Good being with you, John.
Let's talk about Indiana. Republican voters there clearly sent a message last night by selecting Richard Murdoch over 36-year Senate member Dick Lugar. What do you think hurt Lugar more, his time in the Senate or his association and relationship with President Obama?
I think you hit it right on the head. You know, 36 years in the U.S. Senate. Our elected officials are supposed to be citizen politicians who take some time off and go off and serve the public. And what happens is, I've seen it time and again, people get elected to Washington or they get elected to Albany when I was in governor, when I was in the state legislature, and they just become captured by the system. And I remember my first year in the state assembly when I got elected, I was sitting there and I was kind of a renegade, and one of the guys turns to me and says, "Pataki, if you keep your head down and don't speak out too much, you can be here as long as you want." And I turned to him and said, "Then why am I here? You know, there's no point. The idea is to try to achieve something for the people you represent." So I think it was a very clear message. Congress is not liked by the American people. There is this sense that it's Washington against the rest of us, and I think it's an accurate sense. And I think that the time had come for someone who wasn't a Washington insider to bring a fresh perspective to the Senate, and that's what will happen.
Well, you recently founded a new super PAC called Tipping Point. You're specifically working on congressional races in your home state of New York here. Why do you choose to get involved in politics in such a specific way?
Well, first of all, let me say I think the House Republicans have been the only legislative or executive body over the last 2 years that has had the courage to stand up and be counted as to what has to be done. We have to deal with the deficit. We have to deal with tax reform. We have to deal with entitlement reform. And the Senate now, I think it's over 3 years, hasn't even tried to pass a budget. And Obama's budget was a joke. And when they asked his Treasury Secretary Geithner about, well, you're opposed to Ryan's budget, what are you for? He said, well, we know we don't like his, we're not sure what we're for. That's not leadership. So I am worried about the House races. In New York in 2010, we won 6 seats from the Democrats. And this is a difficult state, and we have new lines after reapportionment. And I think as many as 10 to 12 House races in New York could swing between parties during this election. And that could determine whether or not the Republicans continue to control the majority in the House or not. And as I said, I think the House Republican leadership is the only one that has had the courage to stand up on these issues and be counted. And I'm going to do my best to try to make sure that Speaker Boehner and Leader Cantor are still in those roles come 2013.
A lot of folks have criticized these super PACs and their involvement, particularly in this election. Of course, it's perfectly legitimate after the Citizens United ruling. What do you think about the current state of campaign finance, and is this sustainable?
No, I think it's an awful system, and I think it is, again, as is often the case, a unintended consequence of good government groups going out there and saying, you can't give more than $2,500 to a candidate because somehow you corrupt them. You can give millions, tens of millions, to a PAC that supports that candidate, but you can't give more than $2,500 to the candidate. It's absurd. And what has happened is the candidates have lost control of their campaigns. You know, the candidate's campaign, and I'll just make hypothetical numbers, might spend $500,000 on the race, and the interest groups will spend $10 million on the race, so that you don't even hear the candidate's message. I think it's an unfortunate thing. I think it is constitutional, clearly, for these groups to exist. But you know, last time Obama had hundreds of millions of dollars in supporters and soft money from Move On and all these other groups. This time, I think it's important that there be a fairer playing field. I don't think we're going to have nearly the resources that Obama and his team will have, but we have to do our best to try to match them as much they can with dollars, and then beat them in ideas, because that's where we always beat them.
Of course, you're also involved with your group No American Debt.
Right.
Are you hearing anything new or new original ideas coming from Washington right now that might actually work it and deal with this problem of the deficit and debt?
You know, it's really disappointing because I haven't heard anything new, and I think it's kind of getting shunted to the side, particularly by the Obama administration and the Senate, who are just trying for political reasons to demonize people who come up with something. And I think Republicans too, my party, missed an opportunity when Bowles-Simpson was out there, because this is the president's own commission, and it reduces the top marginal rate to 24%, and it closes the deficit. Now, I understand there are things in there that I don't like, you know, things like getting rid of the deduction for home mortgage interest and charitable deductions. I think you could deal with that. I think you could change those in a way where you could restore those in an appropriate way and still have the essence of Obama's own commission's report. And why Republicans haven't embraced a modified Bowles-Simpson, to me, is kind of confusing, because I think it works economically, it works from the standpoint of the deficit, it precludes his class war for demonizing you're trying to help the rich, because it's a report of his own commission. And I would hope, I don't expect it between now and November, unfortunately, but I would hope that, particularly if Governor Romney wins, and we could see something along those lines. Now, I know in the debate, would you cut $10 of spending for $1 of tax increase, and all of our candidates, including Governor Romney, said no, and I think they're right. We don't want to raise taxes. But what we will do, I think, Republicans, is agree to raising revenues by closing loopholes and exemptions and grant programs that exist under the tax code, so long as it results in lower marginal rates. So I haven't heard anything new. I think it's disappointing. I'm not surprised, and I doubt if we will until November.
What about between November and January, when they have to deal with this issue of the Bush tax cuts and the sequestration? Do you think the Bowles-Simpson plan has any chance of being resurrected?
I think it could, but for the fact that this president is such an ideologue. And I think that's why he just threw it in the garbage can the minute it came in. You know, this commission worked very hard. He had 3 Democratic senators vote yes for this report, and he just threw it away. And the reason was because it doesn't suit his ideological goal, which is to redistribute money by taking from the productive sector and giving it to his less productive constituents. And so I think if this president's going to be there after the election, even if he's not there after next January 20th. So I think unless he is having lost for some legacy piece of having solved the problem, I think it's very unlikely he would do anything other than try to continue his class warfare, take from those who create jobs to give to the government to use to reward their friends. And so I hope so, but I don't think so.
One last issue I want to talk about with you, which I know is very personal for you, is, of course, last week we saw these 9/11 terrorists on trial in Gitmo. They were acting strangely. What did you think when you heard about the behavior of these terrorists in the courtroom?
I think it's appalling. I think it's appalling that we tolerate it. And just think for a minute that President Obama and Holder wanted to hold civilian trials in the civilian courts in lower Manhattan, right next to Ground Zero. That was one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard in my life. They would have had cameras and media and demonstrations and tried to portray themselves as victims instead of the barbaric mass murderers they really are. So I think close it down, let the military tribunal go forward, do not tolerate behavior, do not apologize for the information we obtained from those mass murderers, and convict them.
I know I said that was the last talk, but I do want to get into, since we have a little more time, I want to talk about the presidential race.
Sure.
The Republican nomination is sewn up, with all due respect,
to
Ron Paul. It's over. Previously, you had some reservations about Mitt Romney. What changed your mind?
Well, I think as the campaign goes forward, you look for the perfect candidate. You know, you look for someone who agrees with you on everything. Now, I've never found someone who agrees with me on everything. But Governor Romney has shown, one, his ability to win. Two, he has become, I think, a far better candidate relating to people, dealing with debate issues. I thought he did an excellent job in the debate. And he has supported things like deficit reduction along the lines of what the House is doing. I'd like to see a tax reform piece along the lines of Bowles-Simpson as part of his campaign. But I hope that during the course of it we'll see that. So I think Governor Romney still has a lot of work to do. We know this president and his Chicago operatives are going to have $1 billion to try to dump on his head, because I don't think this president can get reelected by saying, I passed Obamacare, I created these massive deficits, I passed Dodd-Frank, which is driving businesses out of the country. He has nothing in his record he can point to, so I think he's going to do everything he can to try to disqualify Governor Romney. I don't think he's going to succeed. I think Governor Romney has been through it, is ready for it, and will win this race.
And out of all the names out there we hear for possible vice presidential candidates, who's the one person you think best complements Romney?
You know, there are a lot of good candidates, and the usual suspects, I like them. You know, Senator Rubio, Governor McDonald, Senator Portman, the others that have been mentioned. But this has got to be a personal decision. You know, one of the key elements of having a team is exactly that, the personal relationship to create a team, as opposed to two candidates running together. So I have confidence that Governor Romney will do the appropriate vetting process and look to someone who, one, can do the job of president if that eventuality ever came to pass, and two, that he could work well with, who will help him to convince the American people, as I believe we need to change the direction of this country. So I don't have any specific advice for him. I'm confident he'll make the right choice.
Not anticipating any surprises in Tampa, though?
Who knows? You know, it could be an interesting time.
All right. Former New York Governor George Pataki, thanks so much for stopping by the studios.
Thank you. Good being with you.
Enjoyed it.